where every paw print matters. From first vaccines to final goodbyes, we walk every step with your best friend. Because at NobleNest, pets aren't patients. Their family was the kind of morning that didn't ask for anything, no noise, no light. Just a thin veil of mist hanging over the sleepy rooftops, blurring the edges of the world like an old photograph left in the rain. The street outside my cottage was still. The kind of stillness that doesn't come from peace, but from absence. Even the birds, it seemed, had forgotten how to sing. I stood at the window with a chipped mug in my hands, watching the fog eat the garden fence. My coffee had long gone cold. I didn't care. I wasn't drinking it for the caffeine. I just needed to hold something. 3 years had passed since I lost my daughter, and in that time I'd mastered the art of pretending. I smiled at the grocer. I nodded politely at the neighbors. I said things like, "one day at a time," and she would have wanted me to keep going. But truthfully, most days I just watched the clock bleed into the walls. The silence in this house didn't echo anymore. It settled in. It grew roots. That morning was like all the others until I saw him. At first, it was just a blur at the edge of the fog. A low, hunched shape moving with an awkward kind of rhythm, like it was limping but trying not to show it. As it got closer, I realized it was a dog, small, dirty, matted with wet leaves, clinging to its fur like forgotten promises. It carried something in its mouth, a bundle. A toy, maybe. He stopped right at the edge of my fence, not close enough to be intrusive, but close enough to be seen. He placed the bundle down. It was a faded, blue plush rabbit, one ear chewed to ribbons. Then he looked up at me. Those eyes, they weren't just sad, they were haunted. There was a story behind them. A whole life, maybe. But whatever it was, he didn't tell it with growls or whines. He just looked, long and hard, like he was reading something in me too. I stepped out onto the porch, barefoot. The wooden floor was cold, slick with the morning dew, but I didn't feel it. All I felt was this sudden tightening in my chest, like some part of me I'd buried had just stirred in its sleep. He didn't run. He didn't bark. He simply nudged the stuffed rabbit toward me with his nose and sat. I crouched slowly, my knees aching like they always did, and reached out. "No collar," I whispered. "No tags. Where'd you come from, huh?" Up close, I could see that the rabbit toy wasn't just any toy. It had a name stitched across the belly in thread that had almost worn away. Lyla. My daughter's name. I froze. The world tilted just a little. It could have been coincidence. Had to be, right? There were other girls named Lyla. But the timing, the look in his eyes, the way he came to my gate and not the next. I don't know. It was as if the universe had nudged a piece back into place, like some unseen hand was drawing a line between my broken heart and his. He followed me inside without hesitation. That's how it started, not with a rescue, but a quiet offering, not with barking or chaos or dramatic music swelling in the background, just two souls equally worn, sitting across from each other in a house that hadn't known warmth in years. That first day, I didn't name him. He didn't need a name. We just existed together in the same quiet, but somehow it was already starting to feel different. He didn't bark that first night, didn't pace, didn't whimper. He just curled up beside the fireplace, the one I hadn't lit since the year Lila's laughter disappeared from this house, and rested his chin on that tattered rabbit like it was a lifeline. I sat across from him, the floor cold beneath me, legs crossed like a child at story time, and I watched, just watched. He had the kind of stillness that didn't feel nervous or submissive. It felt respectful, like he knew he was in someone else's pain and was trying to take up as little space as possible. That kind of awareness, you don't teach that. It's born from loss. I knew that kind of stillness all too well. I found myself talking aloud without realizing it. "You can stay?" I murmured. "Not because I need company. I mean, maybe I do, but—" He lifted his head, just a little. "But because it feels like you need somewhere to stop running." I didn't expect an answer. And of course I didn't get one. But something in the room shifted, like the air exhaled just once. Like we'd silently agreed to something neither of us could quite name. That night, I dreamt for the first time in months. It wasn't vivid, just flashes. A swing creaking in slow motion. A puddle rippling with rain. A child's giggle, soft and far away. And somewhere in the haze, that dog, standing in water up to his chest, holding something in his mouth that I couldn't quite see. When I woke up, I found him at the back door, staring out at the yard. His fur was still dirty, his ribs still too visible. But there was something dignified about the way he stood there, like he wasn't waiting to be let out, but watching for something he'd lost. I knelt beside him and finally said it. "Charlie." He turned toward me. "I don't know why," I added, suddenly embarrassed. "You just look like one." He licked my hand. So that was it. No ceremony, no tag or ribbon, just a look, a name, and a lick. From then on, he was Charlie. The days that followed felt strange in their quiet evolution. I found myself sweeping the porch again, lighting the fire at night, even humming once or twice, not songs, just half-breaths of melody that used to fill this home when Lyla would twirl barefoot in the hallway. Charlie never demanded anything, but he had this way of gently guiding me back to life. He'd nudge his food bowl toward me when I forgot to eat. He'd press his head against my thigh when I got lost staring out the window too long. And when I had those heavy, gasping sobs that came without warning, the kind that hit you like a wave out of nowhere, he didn't try to fix it. He just laid his paw across my foot. Still. Solid. A week after he arrived, we walked the long way through town, something I hadn't done in years. People noticed him. He wasn't like the other strays around here. There was something regal about him, like he carried history, a story, an ache people couldn't quite place. An old woman outside the bakery leaned down and said, "There's something in those eyes, like he's seen a war." I didn't correct her. We were nearly home when the child appeared. He couldn't have been more than 4. Curly hair, cheeks smeared with playground dirt, standing outside his mother's car as she struggled with grocery bags. He stared at Charlie like he'd seen a ghost. "Mummy," he whispered, tugging at her sleeve. "That's the dog from the water." The mother froze, slowly knelt beside him. "What did you say?" The dog from the water, the one who saved me." Now it was my turn to freeze. Charlie didn't react like I thought he might. He didn't wag his tail, didn't bark. He just stepped forward, cautious, and lowered his head until it was level with the boy's. The boy reached out and touched his ear, gently. His mother's face was pale. "Is this true?" I asked, unsure who I was even speaking to. She looked at me and her eyes began to well. "Last summer," she said, "at a park. There was a pond. I turned for 1 second, just one. He fell in." Her voice cracked. There was no one else around. But then this dog, this exact dog, came out of nowhere, jumped straight into the water, pulled him out by his shirt, then vanished. I looked down at Charlie. He wasn't even looking at us. His eyes were fixed on the boy, like he was making sure he was really okay. The woman swallowed hard. I tried to find him, asked everyone. Posted online, he just disappeared. The boy threw his arms around Charlie's neck, and for the first time since I found him, Charlie made a sound, a soft, low whimper, like something inside him had finally broken loose. I blinked against the sting in my eyes. "He saved your son," I whispered. The woman nodded, and I never got to thank him. But it was what she said next that cracked me open. She crouched beside Charlie, placed her hand on his back, and said, "Who saved you, boy?" And suddenly, I didn't have any answers either. The next day, I lit the fire just after breakfast. It had become our quiet ritual, mine and Charlie's. After our morning walk, after his careful sniff around the fence line, we'd settle by the hearth like 2 worn-out soldiers resting between battles. I'd open a book I never finished. He'd place that blue rabbit between his paws and stare into the flames like they held memories instead of warmth. I still hadn't told anyone about the name stitched across its belly. Not even the boy's mother. Something about it felt personal, private, sacred, even. Like if I said it aloud, I might shatter the thin string of magic that had started to thread itself between my grief and Charlie's gaze. But the truth was, I had questions. Too many. Why did that boy recognize him? Why the rabbit? Why Lila's name? I told myself they were coincidences. Strange ones, sure, but not impossible. And yet, deep down, something in me knew better. That week, I began taking Charlie to the school where I used to teach, the little primary down by the park. I hadn't stepped inside those gates since I left after Lila's funeral. Couldn't. Just being near that much louder had once felt like walking through smoke with no lungs. But now, with Charlie trotting beside me, steady, gentle, silent, I didn't feel like I was suffocating anymore. I felt anchored. Mrs. Brooks, the head teacher, nearly dropped her teacup when she saw me. "Good heavens, I thought you'd moved away," she said, holding the door open. I didn't move. Just smiled the smallest smile. Thought about it 100 times, but he found me instead. She bent to greet Charlie and paused, hand over her heart. Well, he's something special. He was. The school had a special needs program, a small room at the back with soft lights, beanbags, sensory tools, and 3 or 4 kids who rarely made eye contact, let alone spoke. One of them was Noah, 6 years old, non-verbal since the accident that took his sister. His parents had tried every therapy, every specialist. He hadn't spoken in almost 8 months. Barely looked anyone in the eye. But the moment Charlie walked into that room, Noah looked up. Not just a glance. A full, open stare, not blinking, not afraid. Then he got up, walked across the room, and without a single word, placed his hand on Charlie's head. The silence in the room shifted. It didn't feel hollow anymore. It felt holy. That night I sat by the fireplace again. Charlie had curled beside my feet, and I found myself whispering into the crackle of the logs. "She used to call rabbits Opsy," I said. He tilted his head. "Lyla. When she was little. Every time she saw one in the garden, she'd yell, 'Look, Mommy, a Hopsy!'" I smiled barely at her favorite toy, a blue rabbit, just like yours. Charlie didn't move, but his eyes, they held something, like he remembered somehow. I didn't cry. Not then. I cried later, in the kitchen, after I opened the old biscuit tin where I kept Lila's things. The last crayon drawing, the hair clip, a faded birthday card with a smeared fingerprint heart. And tucked inside, barely touched by time, was a photo I hadn't looked at in years. Lyla holding her blue rabbit, laughing. And just beside her, half-cropped, a white dog. I brought it closer to the light. Not Charlie, but close. So close it stopped my breath. The next day, I asked around town, started leaving notes, visiting shelters, piecing together threads I had long abandoned. That's when I met Marlene. She worked at the animal rescue down by the old railway tracks. She looked at the photo for a long time before nodding slowly. "That dog," she said, "brought in 2 years ago by a little girl and her father. The girl was sick, couldn't keep him. She cried so hard we all nearly quit our jobs right then and there." "Do you know her name?" I asked. She hesitated. "I remember the dog had a stuffed rabbit in his mouth. The girl tucked a note in its ear. We didn't notice it until days later." I stared. "Do you still have it?" She nodded. She came back 5 minutes later with a faded piece of paper. The ink was shaky, childlike. It read, "Please keep him safe. His name is Charlie. He's my best friend. If you find him, please love him. He's very at the bottom. Love, Lyla." Not my Lyla, but a Lyla. A different child, a different blue rabbit. But somehow, in a universe too big for coincidence, a thread had woven through time and ache and brought that brave soul to my doorstep. Not as a ghost of the past, but as a healer in the present. I stared at the note in my hands for a long time. Then I folded it gently and tucked it into Charlie's collar. He looked up at me, ears soft, eyes deep as rainwater. "You saved her," I whispered. "You saved me." And maybe that's what he needed all along, not a leash, not a command, not a name me. But to be seen, to be understood, like I did that morning when he showed up with a rabbit in his mouth and a name stitched across time. Some nights, Charlie still sits by the gate. He stares down the road like he's waiting. Like some part of him still remembers the hand that let him go with love, not neglect. And when he looks at me, there's peace now. He's not searching anymore. Neither am I. Sometimes people ask how I found him. I tell them the truth. I didn't. He found me. And that's the thing about the ones we save. Sometimes they save us first.